Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IO Edge, where industrial organizational psychology meets the fast paced world of modern HR. I'm your host, Dr. Jacqueline Minor. This podcast is dedicated to HR professionals, managers, and IO psychologists looking to lead with insight, strategy, and confidence. Whether you're an HR professional looking to level up or an IO psych grad wondering where you fit in the business world, this podcast gives you the tools and insight to lead with purpose. On today's podcast, we will discuss stability disrupted, finding purpose after the layoff. Joining us today is our special guest, Dr. Rajanique Modeste, owner of Vestigia Organizational Strategies and the author of the workbook, After the Layoff, Reclaiming Power When Stability Disappears. It's available on Amazon right now, so make sure you run out and go get your copy. Our topic today ties into Dr. Modeste's workbook, where we will explore how individuals can process the emotional impact of layoffs, reconnect with their identity, and take actionable steps toward clarity and purpose. So welcome to the show, Dr. Modeste.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacqueline Minor. I really appreciate you having me on to this episode. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I felt that your topic was very relatable as of this time because we're seeing that a lot of people are being laid off for various reasons and in various industries. So I felt that the topic is very important. And I too have had layoffs in my 21-year career in HR to where it does create some level of impact, not only to, your mental state, but you're also kind of left wondering about your self-worth. So I appreciate you joining. And what we'll do is, as I said, we'll go through several questions relating to the emotional impact of layoffs and also dig a little more deeper into your workbook. So first question for you is, what does stability disrupted mean in today's workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's going to be different for who you speak with. So for me personally, when I've been laid off a few times, so it always comes at a time that I'm not ready, I'm not prepared, like I don't have $1 million in the bank. So stability disrupted for me means it shakes me off my foundation, right? It comes at a time, like I said, where I'm not financially secure. I don't have 6 months of a runway. And so having to regain my footing from a financial perspective is one way that stability is disrupted. Another way is that when you are working with an organization, and I'm sure that you know this too, but when you're working with an organization and you start to develop a routine, you start to get integrated and immersed within the culture, you have friends, you are so immersed in that organization because that is a bulk of your time, right? You're there majority of your time throughout the day. And then when that no longer is, that routine is then shattered, right? Because you're used to going to this job, you're used to logging onto your computer at 9 a.m. There's a meeting that happens almost daily, or in my case, like I said, there's a meeting that happens daily, or you can guarantee that there's some email that you got to catch up. So all of that definitely disrupts your stability because that's something that you counted on that is no longer there.
Right. Yeah, that can definitely wreak havoc on someone that's in industry, or as you and I both are, for me, industry and consulting. I think that was one of the reasons why I started a consulting firm, is because with my oil and gas background, anytime the market tanks from an oil and gas perspective, usually it's a disruption to HR and finance people. And I'm been in HR for a long time. So even working in a financial services company, if there's a financial downturn or financial crises, for lack of a better word, those layoffs will continue to happen. Even as small business owners, it definitely can have a huge impact, especially now it's what you can see with contractors in the government space. A lot of those persons have lost their contracts, and that does cause a huge disruption of, how am I going to pay my rent? how am I going to cover my mortgage? You know,
Yeah.
there's several people that I know who work for themselves that are in this type of situation, and they are feeling some levels of grief, fear, depression. So I'm really glad to see that you have the workbook. And I wanted to understand from you, what inspired you to create after the layoff, reclaiming power when stability disappears?
Yeah, I mean, my own experience for one of having to go through yet another layoff and then the impact that it was having. I'm in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, so there are a lot of government contractors here, a lot of federal workers. So hearing some of the things that they are experiencing. So we talked about grief for just a moment, very briefly, but I do want to address that. And grief looks different for some people, but for the federal workers who were in their job for 20, 30 years and have again, to use the word foundation, have the foundation taken out from under them. And if you see
Mhm.
the cover of the book, I've got that cracked foundation. So that is representative of how when the foundation is cracked, how that really just takes you off your game, takes you off that stability that you had when you were looking forward to this job every day, 5 days a week for decades, decades upon decades, right? So, as I mentioned, one of the reasons why I had created the workbook was out of my own experience, but also what I was hearing from the federal workers as well as the government contractors and really any industry who were relying on a job to help create that sense of stability, right? To have
Right.
that consistent paycheck, to have that consistent interaction with your coworkers and colleagues and those static meetings that would take place. So I thought it would be great to really capture the feelings, the essence of what was going on, but also to let people know who were experiencing this that this is not your identity. Although it was a huge part of your life, you can shift from this. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it can be
Right.
done.
Right. I think that at some point when you're kind of in the throes of a layoff, for me, it helped me kind of self reflect to say, okay, this doesn't feel well, but what can I do in the interim to be able to get back into industry? And I think that is one of the reasons why I started my consultancy firm, because it allowed me to still work in the interim of finding another industry job. So I'm probably going to be that person who continues to work industry till retirement and then work the consultancy alongside. At the end of the day, that's the exit plan, to make sure that my brain keeps working and firing and staying connected to the field. How does journaling prompt or help people process the grief, the fear, or the uncertainty?
Well, Dr. Minor, I don't know if you're like me, but I live a lot in my head, right? So,
Yeah.
again, coming from my own experience of internalizing the thing that has happened to me in terms of being laid off and making it very personal as to being laid off, I am very much the only breadwinner in my family. And so, when being laid off and that sense of purpose, that sense of, well, the money that was coming in is no longer coming in.
Right.
um, Again, it just it forces you to say, well, what do I do now? Well, what can I do? Well, who can I talk to help me through this thing? Is there anybody that I can talk to
Mhm.
help me through this thing? And because I internalize everything, it feels like me, myself, and having those conversations. I have them in my head rather than having them outside of my head to see that visualization of, oh, okay, so I need to do this a little differently. Oh, well, maybe I can talk to this person because the voices in my head aren't really
Mhm.
able to come out with that sort of solution. But writing it down gets it out of your head. Writing it down lets you see it in the present. Writing it down helps you release all of those those emotions, that feeling, the uncertainty, all those things that are bottled up and, pretty much feeling like a volcano, it helps you get that out so that you feel a little bit better. I'm not going to say that you feel, a whole lot better, but at least that aspect of I need to release this energy somehow. If I write it down, that I'm getting it out, I can see what it is that I'm going through. I can see how to shift my mindset. I can see that I might need to reach out to someone. Maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's a friend, to
Mhm.
help me work through these feelings and emotions that I'm going through. And so journaling has a very therapeutic benefit to it.
Right. Yeah, and I think as you said, it definitely helps you to understand where you were, really just processing the emotions, because grief doesn't look like just always losing a family member or losing someone. It could look at or look like losing a job that sometimes in our brain we associate our job with our worth. And I struggled with that for a long time.
Right.
I'm not a very good person to be laid off. And the last time I got laid off, my dad, he's in Arkansas. He called me consistently. Hey, just checking on you. How's your conduct today? So, because he knows my brain is always running, but it's like I have to feel, like I have some worth or plugged into society and being a, good citizen or contributing in some way or fashion. So, but that doesn't, at the end of the day, our job does not define us as a person, and it doesn't define our worth either. So it's one of those things where, I've had to talk to myself. Although you don't have this job, it's not tied to your ability of self-worth. So even with us, we don't always get it right, but it's more like, how can we get through the stage of uncertainty or instability because of the layoff? And it's not due to anything of our own doing. It's just that it happens.
Happens.
We're
Although it was a huge part of your life, you can find worth in other things and hobbies and something else that brings you joy, right? And I think,
Mhm.
society has conditioned us to think that we need to work in order to define ourselves. We need to work in order to have a sense of purpose. And that's not accurate. We can find a sense of purpose in other things that bring us joy in our family. And as I
Mhm.
mentioned, if you have hobbies, in other things that are conducive to increasing your mental health in a positive way. It's just a really good tool to help you reframe your thinking and to understand that as you indicated, you're not defined by your job, although it was what was bringing the money in for a long time. You'll find
Mhm.
something else that's is equally as uh financially stable for you to get your footing back, right? But still
Right.
in the interim until that comes, helping you see that this is just a a little flicker of time that is rocking your foundation. And doing the journal prompts to, like I said, reframe your mind and shift your thinking helps
Mhm.
you to see and be ready for that next opportunity.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes it creates or prompts some innovative thinking, or it prompts your idea of, you know what, these are skills that I've acquired over the years. Say, like for me, and I was like, that's not something that can be taken away, even though I may not have the job. I still have that level of knowledge, that level of experience, that level of expertise. So let me package that and see if I can offer it to people who are, maybe a small business owner or someone who is needing some HR consulting. So writing that down and kind of
Mhm.
looking, saying, hey, you know what? I want to kind of buffer or shelter myself from doing that, being subjected to a layoff in the future. So that's kind of, for me, helping to really focus and hone in on, is this something that I really want to do? Do I really want to go back to industry? So I think that that leads into the next question. What does it mean to reclaim power after a layoff?
Oh my gosh, that is an excellent question. I think as I will make this personal again. So for me, thinking that your identity or your job is defines you and defines your purpose, and kind of attaching yourself to whatever the job it brings, whatever that looks like. If you're making six figures and thinking that you have arrived because you're making six figures and there's no way that a job will lay me off, and you might get all
Mhm.
these accolades, and just again attaching yourself to the job and thinking that it has this power over you because it provides a paycheck for you, and that's pretty much it. Now, it may give you some training, you may have a friend or two out of it, and there, of course, there are some other things, but it does not have power over you. Like, the job needs your skill set. The organization needs you in order to continue running. So shifting, like I said, shifting that frame of thinking that this job needs me rather than I need it is how you reclaim your power. And then going into another opportunity and saying, the right job aligns with my values, the right job aligns with who I am as a person and what I want in a company, rather than feeling like you need the job in order to survive.
Right. I think it kind of goes back to, let me see if I can get the phrase right. You eat to live
Mhm. Mhm.
or be able to provide those niceties of, what we do. So it's not that we're enslaving ourselves to the job, but the job allows us to have the things that we want, you know, to where it's not like we're enslaved to just working, working, working and not having some fun or work life balance.
That,
Where,
I just want to make one point. I love that you said, not feeling like the job is enslaving you, because, again, that's that mind shift, but knowing that that job afforded you niceties is just that. It affords you niceties. And, you may get a friend, or you may have some other things that come with it, but that's that's it. Like, that job does not require blood from you in order for you to live. If you understand it from that perspective, it helps again reframe your thinking that they need me in order to continue to sustain the business, in order to continue to run. And without me, they would have to find someone that did the things that I did. And if my job is gone, then I can take my skill set, my knowledge, my values, my morals, all those things to another organization that I align with. So I think that that terminology that you use in terms of enslavement is, it's harsh, but it's reality, right?
and sometimes we have to, I'm one of those very transparent people. And sometimes the harsh reality is that, we shouldn't, especially after coming out of COVID. A lot of people may not have
Mhm.
stopped to smell the roses, or they may have not stopped to enjoy those special moments with their families, not knowing that they may or may not be here. So taking
Mhm.
pause and being able to say, you know what, I'm just not, you do your job, you do it well, but it shouldn't be at the risk of losing your health behind it, for instance, because you're stressing, or you're type A, or you're, neglecting your family because of your job. So just putting it, as you said, it is a mind shift in whichever way, whether you're working and you feel like, man, it's just like, I really am not feeling the psychological safety or being mentally
Mhm.
refreshed. When you come to work, you want to come to work and do a good job, but then be able to go home and be like, man, yep, I feel good about the job. Or you come and you wake up and you're eager to do your part, because that comes from feeling valued by your employer. You feel like your employer has your best or well-being at heart. That's why people work and are dedicated and committed to staying at jobs. And when you have layoffs, that thought is fractured or disrupted, because you're like, man, I worked so hard for the job. And it's just as if I'm left with nothing. But it's just, it's a
Hmm.
transactional type of situation to put it in perspective. But, the layoffs can be hard to those who, it doesn't define you. A layoff doesn't define you as a person or your character, especially if you go in and you know, do the job. It's just the circumstances that happen where companies either have to shelter. A lot of the companies did not last after COVID, as we know. Even now, when
Yeah.
contracts are pulled, that means those jobs have to go away, and they don't have the resources any longer. So the question is, how do you help people move from uncertainty to clarity?
Yeah, that's I mean, all these questions are great, but I'm gonna continue to say that this is a great question. So moving people from uncertainty to clarity involves a process of them understanding, why tell me about the uncertainty. What is it that has you feeling uncertain? Is it that you're not sure where your next paycheck is coming from or how you're gonna pay the bills? Well, let's get you some resources. Are you unsure of being able to find another opportunity because you feel like since you're over 40, the jobs are very few and far
Hmm.
between? Well, there's a law that um, prevents people who are over 40 from not getting hired, although that is, a very well deserved concern. But,
Right.
let's find opportunities where they're not even thinking about, the age. They're really thinking about your skill set. And then if
Hmm.
if it is about, you're concerned about your age, well, is it more or less you need to really refresh your interviewing skills and help you feel more confident, regardless of what your age is. And so that uncertainty usually comes out of fear because they have potentially been in the workforce for a long time. So take the federal workers who
Right.
were at their job for decades and now having to rethink, what opportunities look like, can they be able to refresh their resumes and have people interview them because they've been in the government for so long. Usually that's because they've been in a place for so long that change feels uncomfortable. Like I said, that uncertainty of can they get hired from another organization? Is somebody going to hire them because they may be over 40 or their skill set is one skill set and with the onslaught of set of AI and the fear of AI taking over some roles,
Right.
or having to learn a new skill. So all those things bring uncertainty, which are real concerns, but not that there shouldn't be a focus on that because what needs to be the focus are your skill set, your ability to do the job that you're looking for, or just revamping your resume so it speaks to the skills that you can do. So getting people out of that, the what if or can I and or should I or all of those words that they wrap themselves into to make them feel like they're not capable or they are less than or they're not ready for is how you have to get them to understand that's not something that's reality. Sure, it can be in some circumstances, but not many. Focusing on the skills and attributes that they have to moving to here's how you can do that. Here's some resources for you to really help you move from, the jobs that are looking for what you have, industries that need what you have, or if you don't want to go back into industry, what consulting jobs you can go into and how you can
Right.
repackage, as you said, your skill sets and your abilities into being able to go on your own if that's something you choose to do.
Right. And I think that, HR has a role in helping persons who are laid off to be able to, support them beyond the severance. So a lot of companies have been, offering severance packages. For me, last refinery job I had, I was laid off because, just did not rebound from one of the hurricanes that came through and then COVID happened. So it was more of the outplacement services that they offered to assist with finding other gainful employment. So that's
Yeah.
something that HR professionals like myself are able to do in these workspaces to help support laid off employees beyond the severance. So I think that that is worth mentioning that, as you mentioned, they can do resume review. That was something that, you know, the outplacement service had. They had a support counselor or team member who helps stay engaged with me. Hey, how things going? Let me review your resume. There were other pieces of that where if there was a new skill that I was interested in learning. So they provided all of these tools and resources through these outplacement services. So companies will use them to help those persons who are laid off to be able to have a better chance on finding more gainful employment after they're laid off. So I think that that's a big help. It kind of further keeps it, layoffs are not easy. Even if it's something that that you see the
Yeah.
company kind
Yeah.
of doing this, and it's like, well, it's almost on the cliff, ready to jump off, and it's like it still is not something that you're fully prepared for. See
Hmm.
the wave coming and going, and it's like I've seen this movie before, and I know the ending, but you're never really ready. But I think that employers do a great job if they're able to provide the outplacement companies to help the employees. So, moving on to you mentioned earlier about psychological safety, how can organizations create psychologically safe offboarding experiences, in your opinion?
I think, well, let me just say this. Normally in organizations, while they are going to provide some organizations can provide outplacement services, you still often don't get that intimate touch, right? It's just here are the resources, I'll check back on you.
Hmm.
It's really, to your point earlier, it's really a transactional process. It's not a very intimate process where people feel like you really are in my corner. So for those organizations that do not offer placement services, what tools do they have? What tools or resources are they given? And so, the workbook can certainly be a tool and a resource for those companies that don't have outplacement services. Even for companies that do, just another resource they can offer and add to the package that they provide to those who are being laid off. So in terms of creating psychological safety, I think that there can be a couple of different things that can be done for organizations. One, as I just mentioned, having employees feel like they're not just a number and a robot, if you will, that's coming off the assembly line. And so they are left to their own devices. That feels so impersonal when
Right.
you don't really get that touch point, or you just feel like they're doing it as surface level sort of interaction. But the psychological safety can also should come in where you create an environment where employees can ask questions, can say if I need let's say a reference, if I need to reach back for any other reason, will you be available? Or if I have other questions, can you, will you be able to answer my questions? Or if you aren't, who can I reach out to? And other than just, again, making them feel like robot on an assembly line, what are you really doing to help provide a sense of, I know that this has happened to you, but we do care that you try to find or land somewhere else that certainly can use your skill sets, although it won't be here. Here are some resources that you can reach out to, be it an unemployment office, be it something again that
Right.
helps them not have to go hunting and finding on their own, but assist them to regain their footing.
Right. Right. I think the packet of information outside of the outplacement service. For me, it did include the unemployment office, which they have opportunities for those persons who are laid off to have a list of places, that are hiring. So they kind of give you first preference because the unemployment office is also working with employers who are seeking applicants or those persons who can fill different roles. So that's another resource that I found to be very helpful. And they do have unemployment counselors or people there that can, really kind of work with you and help you kind of narrow down, what your next job looks like, direct you to some um, upskilling opportunities. Okay. So,
I do want to interject in terms of the unemployment offices. I've not found my own personal experience, you talking about unemployment offices providing, ways that you can upskill or providing some resources. When I was laid off, I did not want to get a phone call from someone or a counselor and saying, hey, here are some opportunities. Again, I had to go hunting and searching myself for those, for
right.
things that I think that I would be aligned to my skills and capabilities, and I did feel like I was on my own. They were just there to ensure I submitted my unemployment information every Sunday, but that sort of experience. And I wonder if there are others out there who have had similar experience to me where you don't really get to talk to an unemployment counselor. Maybe it depends on the role or job you had. I'm not quite certain,
Mhm.
but and maybe it's a different state, but it's not. I haven't had any consistent experience like you've had.
Right. And you do mention a good point. I actually had that experience in Louisiana area. So it's
Mm,
more of it's a small like in Slidell, for instance, it's very small. And I think what helped me was understanding that when we were working with trying to find like offshore personnel, for instance, we worked directly with the unemployment office and the person that was over that division. So when something popped up, I physically could see that they had these people in place that could help. And maybe that's something that needs to be create more awareness that there are people in the unemployment office who are able to, you know, help you, more instead of just, sending in your application or sending in your weekly things. So I think that that has changed or that has shifted, especially after COVID, because a lot of the unemployment offices were no longer accessible to physically walk in, talk to somebody. And I didn't have that same experience in Houston. Houston is a big city, kind of like DC, and you're just submitting your applications, your work stuff, during the day, and that's about it. You don't talk to anybody. So I think it's where you're located if that more human touch is available through the unemployment office. So, and I don't know too many people are going to want to go hang out at the unemployment office, to be honest. So,
Well, no, but it would be nice if I received a call on, like, how are you doing? Are you having any success?
mhm,
Rather than me typing in, I think what this is one of the questions. Why did you only apply to the number of jobs that you applied to? Well, I was tired. I just was
right.
physically and mentally exhausted from looking for an opportunity every hour of the day. I mean, looking for a job is a full-time job. So if you can
Oh, yes,
imagine
definitely.
dealing with that and all the other emotional things that are compounded with that of um, only getting a fraction of what your salary was. I mean, there's that.
Right.
And then
Right.
two, feeling like you have to report to an agency about
Mhm.
and
Exactly.
that just it feels so dehumanizing is the word. I
Mhm.
just I just didn't have a good feeling.
Right. Right. And in most cases, I don't know anyone that I've talked to that had the best experience with, the unemployment office either. I think,
Yeah.
if I had not have worked directly with a representative there to, help us find other, employees, that experience may not have even existed. It would have just still been going online, submitting my information, having to answer these questions, but that is still something too that people are not aware of, to where this is the other side of being unemployed. Now you have to go
Yeah.
through and,
Right.
spend hours on end trying to locate jobs. So it can be, as you said, mentally draining. And on top of that, the rejections,
Yeah.
when you start
The
applying and
rejections. Oh my gosh.
sorry, you don't meet our qualifications, or you're interviewing, and then they send you the Dear John letter, and it's just like, oh my goodness, help me. So I can really see how the workbook can help you go through this process, so that way you can keep some level of sanity as you're going through. So I like in the book where you
Yeah.
say, you are not your job, you are your story and you get to reclaim it. So I like the
Yes. All
phraseology
day, every
there.
day.
Dr.
Thank you.
Modeste, I really appreciate you coming to join the show. As I said, I think this is a very worthy topic, and I think that your workbook is right on time. Considering we have a very high population of
Thank
people
you.
who are in the fight to find work after the layoff, and making sure that they are okay and know that it's not them. We want to thank Dr. Modeste for joining the show today. Be sure to go out and purchase her workbook, After the Layoff, Reclaiming Power When Stability Disappears, available now on Amazon. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast. On our next episode, we will explore leading through change, building resilience in the workplace, with our special guest, Dr. Juliet Nelson. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Spotify to stay connected to the conversation at the intersection of psychology, business, and human resources. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Minor. I'll see you soon.